My friend thought sabotaging my relationship was funny until I flipped the script. There are moments in life that feel like they belong in a movie, the kind where time slows down and you can hear your own heartbeat echoing in your ears. I was standing in the middle of my own living room, surrounded by people I love, holding a glass of champagne that had gone flat in my hand. My best friend, the woman I'd known since we were 6 years old, was on one knee in front of my boyfriend. The room was laughing. She was laughing. Even he was laughing. But I saw the flicker in her eyes, that competitive glint I'd ignored for 25 years. It wasn't a joke to her. It was a power play. And in that moment, something inside me snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just quietly, like a thread finally breaking under too much weight. I smiled, I clapped, and I started planning my counter move. My name is Sophie, and for as long as I can remember, Rachel has been my person. We met in Mrs. Patterson's first grade class, bonding over matching lunchboxes and a shared fear of the school hamster. We grew up together, survived middle school awkwardness, navigated high school heartbreaks, and graduated college as inseparable. She was the maid of honor in my imagination long before I even had a boyfriend. We finished each other's sentences, knew each other's coffee orders, and could communicate an entire conversation with just a raised eyebrow. She was my sister in every way that mattered, and I loved her fiercely. But love, I've learned, can be complicated. Rachel has always been competitive. Not in a malicious way, at least not at first. It was more like a need to be the center of attention. When I got into a good college, she got into a better one. When I got my first promotion, she got a bigger one. When I found a great apartment, she found one with a rooftop pool. I brushed it off as her being driven. I told myself that her need to win wasn't personal. It was just who she was, and I accepted it because underneath all that ambition, she was still my best friend. At least that's what I wanted to believe. Then came Liam. I met him at a bookshop, of all places. He reached for the same copy of a classic novel I was eyeing, and our fingers touched. It sounds cliche, I know, but there was an instant spark. He was funny, thoughtful, and impossibly kind. He remembered small details like how I took my coffee or that I hated the sound of chewing. We dated for 2 years before he asked me to move in with him. When I told Rachel, her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. She congratulated me, hugged me, and immediately started suggesting decorating ideas for our new apartment. But I noticed she didn't ask how I felt. She didn't ask about Liam. She just started planning our housewarming party like it was her own event. Over the next few months, I noticed subtle shifts. Rachel would find excuses to be around when Liam and I were together. She'd text him memes and joke about their shared sense of humor. She'd touch his arm when she laughed at his jokes, linger a second too long. I told myself I was being paranoid. She was just being friendly. She was my best friend. She wouldn't do anything to hurt me. But the nagging feeling in my gut grew louder every time I saw them interact. The dinner party was my idea. I wanted to celebrate our 2-year anniversary with our closest friends. I'd spent the whole day preparing, cooking Liam's favorite pasta dish, setting out candles, and choosing a playlist that felt like us. Our living room, the one we decorated together with mismatched thrift store finds and too many houseplants, felt warm and inviting. Rachel arrived early, as always, wearing a dress that was just a little too fancy for a casual dinner. She complimented the decor, kissed Liam on the cheek, and settled into the conversation like she owned the room. The evening was going well. Everyone was laughing, the wine was flowing, and I felt a genuine glow of happiness. Then Rachel stood up, raising her glass. "I have an announcement," she said, her voice carrying that theatrical tone she used when she wanted everyone's attention. The room quieted, all eyes on her. She walked over to Liam, who was sitting on the couch, and dramatically dropped to one knee. My heart stopped. "Liam," she said, her voice dripping with mock sincerity, "will you marry me?" The room erupted in laughter. People clapped, someone wolf whistled, and Liam's face went bright red. He laughed awkwardly, not knowing where to look. I forced a smile even as my hands trembled around my champagne flute. "It's just a joke, Sophie," Rachel said, looking at me with those eyes that dared me to challenge her. "Don't be so serious," everyone kept laughing. They thought it was hilarious. Even my boyfriend, the man I loved, was laughing. I was the only one who saw what was really happening. I saw the way she looked at him, not as a joke, but as a challenge. A way to remind me that she could have anything she wanted, including him if she really wanted. It wasn't funny to me. It was a declaration of war. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even leave the room. Instead, I clapped along with everyone else, took a sip of my flat champagne, and smiled. But inside, my mind was racing. I thought about all the times she'd undermined me, all the little digs, the competitions I'd ignored. I thought about how she'd always been the center of our friendship, and I'd been the loyal sidekick. Not anymore. The party wound down, and as the last guest left, Rachel hugged me goodbye. "It was just a joke, Soph. You know I love you," she whispered in my ear. I nodded and watched her walk out the door. Liam came over and wrapped his arms around me. "That was weird, right?" he asked. "I don't know why she did that." "Oh, I know why. I said quietly, and I know exactly what to do about it. I spent the next week planning my response. Rachel had an ex-boyfriend, Daniel. They dated for 2 years before she dumped him brutally, publicly, and cruelly. She'd humiliated him at a party, telling everyone he was boring and not ambitious enough. He was the sweetest guy, the kind who remembered anniversaries and brought flowers for no reason. She broke his heart, and I never forgave her for it. Daniel and I had stayed friendly. We'd grab coffee occasionally, talk about books, laugh about how ridiculous Rachel could be. I knew he was still hurt by what she did, even if he pretended otherwise. One afternoon, I called him and asked if we could meet. He agreed without hesitation. We met at a quiet cafe downtown. I ordered my usual latte and he got a black coffee. I looked at him, really looked, and saw someone who was kind, thoughtful, and devastatingly handsome. I'd always thought that, but I'd pushed it aside because he was my best friend's ex. Not anymore. Daniel, I said, setting down my cup. I have a strange question. Rachel proposed to my boyfriend at a dinner party. As a joke, she said, but it wasn't a joke. And I want to show her what it feels like. Daniel raised an eyebrow. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we give her a taste of her own medicine. Let's get engaged. He almost choked on his coffee. Excuse me? Not for real, I explained. Just on paper, just to show her. I want to propose to you at her birthday party next week, in front of everyone. Let her see how it feels. Daniel stared at me for a long moment. Then a slow smile spread across his face. You know what? She did the same thing to me. She publicly humiliated me. I think I'd like to see her face when the tables are turned. We shook hands across the table, sealing a deal that was equal parts revenge and justice. I didn't know what would happen after, but I knew one thing for certain. Rachel had started a game she wouldn't win. The week leading up to Rachel's birthday was a whirlwind of preparation. I felt like a spy planning a heist. Every detail carefully considered, every potential outcome mapped out in my mind. Daniel and I met twice more to rehearse our engagement. We chose a cheap ring from a vintage store. Nothing flashy, just a simple silver band that could pass for something meaningful. We practiced our lines, our expressions, and our timing. It felt absurd. A grown woman planning a fake proposal for revenge. But there was something liberating about it. For the first time in my life, I wasn't playing the passive role. I wasn't the quiet sidekick, the forgiving friend, the one who let things slide. I was taking control. Daniel, to his credit, was surprisingly enthusiastic about the plan. I think part of him wanted to hurt Rachel the way she'd hurt him, the way she'd dismissed his feelings, laughed at his vulnerability, and made him feel small. He deserved closure, and this was our way of giving it to him. But as the days passed, I noticed something shifting between us. The rehearsals became less like acting and more like genuine connection. We'd linger over coffee, talk about things that had nothing to do with Rachel, and share stories about our lives. He made me laugh, genuinely laugh, in a way that felt effortless and real. The morning of the party, I stood in front of my mirror and studied my reflection. I wanted to look confident, unbothered, and stunning. I chose a simple black dress, something elegant but understated. It wasn't about outshining Rachel. It was about showing her that I didn't need to compete. I was enough, exactly as I was. Liam, who had no idea about my plan, kissed me goodbye and told me to have fun. I felt a pang of guilt, but I pushed it aside. He'd laughed at Rachel's joke. He'd let her humiliate me in front of our friends. Maybe he deserved to see what happened when you didn't stand up for the person you loved. Daniel picked me up at 7. He looked devastating in a navy suit that fit him perfectly, his hair freshly cut, a nervous smile on his face. You look beautiful, he said, and the sincerity in his voice made my stomach flutter. You look pretty handsome yourself, I replied, and we both laughed at the absurdity of the situation. The party was at a trendy rooftop bar downtown. Rachel had spared no expense, as always. String lights twinkled above us, and the city skyline glittered in the background. Everyone who mattered was there. Our mutual friends, her co-workers, even her parents. She was holding court at the center of it all, wearing a shimmering gold dress and a tiara that screamed, "Look at me." When she saw us walk in, her smile faltered for just a fraction of a second. She recovered quickly, rushing over to hug me and kiss my cheek. "Sophie, you made it," she said, her voice bright but strained. "And Daniel? I didn't know you two were close." "Oh, we've gotten very close," I said sweetly. "He's been such a wonderful support system lately." Rachel's eyes narrowed, but she didn't say anything. She led us to the bar, handed us drinks, and quickly turned her attention to other guests. I watched her flit around the party, laughing too loudly, touching people's arms, making sure everyone was looking at her. The birthday girl, the center of attention. But I knew the evening was about to change. I felt Daniel's hand on my lower back, a gentle, reassuring presence. We waited for the right moment. It came during the toast. Rachel's father was making a speech about his wonderful daughter, how proud they were, how she'd always been so special. I couldn't help but roll my eyes. As the applause died down, I squeezed Daniel's hand. "Now," I whispered. We walked to the center of the room, where Rachel was standing with her glass raised. The crowd parted instinctively, sensing something was about to happen. I looked at Rachel, held her gaze, and smiled. "Rachel," I said, my voice carrying across the room. You're my best friend, and I have to share something important with you. Her smile wavered. What is it? I turned to Daniel, dropping to one knee in the middle of the rooftop. The room gasped. I pulled the cheap silver ring out of my pocket, held it up, and said, Daniel, will you marry me? For a moment, there was absolute silence. Daniel's face broke into a wide grin. Yes, he said. Yes, of course. He pulled me to my feet and kissed me, and the room erupted in applause. But I wasn't watching the crowd. I was watching Rachel. Her face had gone pale. Her jaw was tight, her eyes wide, her hands trembling around her champagne glass. She looked like someone had slapped her. I'd never seen her like that. It was beautiful. What the hell? She finally spat, her voice loud enough to cut through the noise. This is a joke, right? You're both insane. It's not a joke, Rachel, I said calmly. We're together. We're engaged. You can't be serious, she said, her voice rising. He's my ex-boyfriend. You're my best friend. This is betrayal. I stepped closer to her, lowering my voice so only she could hear. You mean like proposing to my boyfriend at a dinner party? Like humiliating Daniel in front of everyone? Like every time you've tried to one-up me in our entire friendship? I'm just giving you a taste of your own medicine. Her eyes flashed with fury. You're destroying our friendship over this? I'm not destroying anything, I said. You did that yourself. I'm just finally standing up for myself. The party was buzzing with whispered conversations and curious glances. Daniel took my hand and we walked toward the exit. Rachel's voice followed us, shrill and desperate. You'll regret this, Sophie. Both of you. This is the worst mistake you've ever made. I didn't turn around. I didn't answer. I just walked out of the party with Daniel's hand in mine, the cool night air hitting my face like a liberation. When we reached the street, we both burst out laughing. It was nervous, giddy, and slightly hysterical. Did you see her face? Daniel asked, wiping tears from his eyes. I'll never forget that look. Neither will I said. But what do we do now? Daniel looked at me, his expression softening. We figure it out together, one step at a time. We ended up at a quiet diner, sharing a plate of fries and talking until the early hours of the morning. It wasn't a real engagement, and we both knew it, but something had changed between us. There was a connection there, something real and unexpected. I started to wonder if this fake engagement might become something more. The next few days were a blur of damage control. I started by sitting down with Liam. He was angry, hurt, and confused. You proposed to your best friend's ex-boyfriend at her birthday party? He said, pacing our living room. What the hell were you thinking, Sophie? I explained everything. The history, the rivalry, the moment Rachel proposed to him as a joke. I told him how it made me feel, how it was the breaking point after years of subtle competition and undermining. I told him about Daniel, about how we'd planned the whole thing as revenge. It wasn't real, I said. It was just to prove a point. Liam stopped pacing and looked at me. His expression was unreadable. So you humiliated yourself to humiliate her? Do you realize how that looks? Everyone thinks you're actually engaged to someone else. I know, I said. I'm sorry. I didn't think about how it would affect you. I was so focused on hurting her that I forgot about us. We talked for hours, arguing, crying, and eventually understanding. Liam wasn't perfect. He'd laughed at Rachel's joke, and he'd let me feel small. But he loved me and I loved him. We decided to take a break. Not a breakup, but time to figure out what we wanted. It was painful, but it was honest. Next, I had to face Daniel. We met at the same cafe where we'd hatched our plan. He looked tired but relieved. The engagement was fake, I said bluntly. We both know that. But I need to know what you're feeling. Daniel took a deep breath. I'm feeling something, Sophie. I don't know what it is, but it's real. The way I felt when we were together, the way I smiled when I saw you, it wasn't fake. Not to me. I felt tears prick at my eyes. I feel it too, I admitted, but I don't know what to do with it. I have Liam. I have a life with him, and you're my friend, or you were, and I don't want to lose that. We sat in silence for a long moment. Then Daniel reached across the table and took my hand. Then let's not rush anything. Let's just be honest and see where it goes. No fake engagements, no revenge. Just you and me being real. I nodded, and we made a pact to stay friends while we figured things out. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, but it was a beginning. Rachel, unsurprisingly, was not willing to talk. She'd blocked me on everything and was spreading rumors about me to our mutual friends. I decided to let her be. I wasn't going to chase her or beg for forgiveness. I'd made my choices and I'd stand by them. But I did write her a letter. A long, honest letter apologizing for the pain I'd caused while also explaining why I felt I had to do it. I left it at her apartment and walked away. A few weeks passed. I found myself thinking about Daniel more than I should. We'd been texting, meeting for coffee, and slowly rebuilding our friendship, but the feelings were undeniable. One evening, he showed up at my door with a bouquet of wildflowers and a nervous smile. I know you're still figuring things out, he said, but I couldn't keep pretending. I'm falling for you, Sophie, and I know it's messy and I know it's complicated, but I don't care. I want to try. I looked at the flowers, at his hopeful expression, and realized I felt the same. I took his hand and pulled him inside. Let's try, I said, slowly, Honestly, no games. Liam and I officially ended things a few weeks later. It was mutual and we parted as friends. He understood that I'd found something real with Daniel, and he wished me well. Daniel and I took things slow, dating casually, talking about everything. It wasn't the flashy, dramatic romance I'd imagined, but it was real. It was built on honesty and vulnerability. Rachel eventually reached out. She'd read my letter and had been reflecting on our friendship. We met for coffee, a tense, awkward meeting that felt more like a therapy session than a catch-up. She apologized for her behavior, admitted she'd been jealous of my happiness, and said she was working on herself. I apologized for the fake engagement, acknowledging that revenge hadn't been the answer. We didn't become best friends again overnight, but we started a conversation about healing. A year later, Daniel and I got engaged for real this time. We had a small, intimate ceremony in the same botanical garden where I'd imagined my wedding with Liam. It felt poetic, a full-circle moment that reminded me of how far I'd come. Rachel was there as a guest, not as a bridesmaid. We'd repaired our friendship enough to share in each other's happiness, even if it would never be what it once was. During my wedding speech, I raised a glass and said, "Sometimes the people who hurt us the most teach us the most important lessons about ourselves, about boundaries, and about the kind of love we deserve." I'm grateful for every twist and turn that led me here, because I ended up exactly where I'm supposed to be. I looked at Daniel, my husband, my partner, my best friend, and I smiled. The fake engagement had been a mistake, a moment of weakness born from pain and anger, but it had also been a catalyst for change. It had forced me to confront my friendship with Rachel, my relationship with Liam, and ultimately, my feelings for Daniel. Revenge hadn't healed me, but honesty had. And that was worth everything. As I danced with Daniel under the string lights, surrounded by the people I loved, I realized that the best revenge wasn't hurting someone else. It was living a life so full and joyful that the past couldn't touch you anymore. I'd found my peace, my love, and my voice, and that was the real victory.